Rich Clear is our treasurer, and this is the financial report that he sent me as of this morning. So you can see the funding that we have. Granted, the conference funding has not been taken out of this yet. But this is, and it shows you the donations that we have been able to make to Dr. Grossfeld's research over the years. And I guess the amounts in one of the years was great because we were able to get it matched. And so we always have a research fund. So anytime you want to donate, if you can choose to donate to our, the 11Q Research and Resource Group General Fund, which covers things like this conference. I mean, we've had talks with a few people saying, how are you covering this for $100 a head? We're not covering it for $100 a head, not even close. But some of the fundraising we do through the year goes for educational purposes, and this is an educational purpose, well, our biggest educational purpose. So you can designate either the general 11Q Research and Resource Group Fund, or you can designate research. And we have a separate research account, which we raise the money in, and then we donate to Dr. Grossfeld's lab. The donations that we received in 2023 from you guys, from the $11 for 11Q campaigns that we have done, have been $18,097.71. So that's some great fundraising that's been done. In 2023, we did our $11 for 11Q campaign. We linked it directly to Paul's lab, and so that's why in 2023 it shows that we did not have it come through our group first. We had it go directly to his lab. That was our $11 for 11Q last year in November is when we do that. Rich, he files our taxes for us and everything, and make sure that our accounts are secure. So that's his financial report. If you have any questions, he's willing to answer any questions on that. And then this is our report. This is the estimated budget. I don't have the actual budget yet for the actual expenditures for the conference yet. That I will be paying all that probably today or tomorrow. This was the estimated budget, which granted we are going to be quite a bit under that. This was based on what we did in Washington, D.C. That was kind of the same thing. We're actually going to be under this year because this hotel has comped us a lot of things like audiovisual and stuff like that. So that's been great. So we have been able to stay under budget this year. But in general, I would say a conference costs us about $50,000 to put on. So, and then we have the conference fees that come in from the families at $100 for adults and $50 for kids, and 11Q kids are free. So that makes up a small amount of it, but not a huge amount. So we usually plan on spending between $50,000 and $60,000 for a conference. So just so that you have that in your head when raising money, that it's not cheap to put on a conference, but it's super beneficial for everyone who attends. So 11Q Research and Resource Group Board, we actually have some openings that we need some volunteers for. Anyone can volunteer for these if they're watching online, or we will post this through email and also everything also. But Rich has been our treasurer for the last 14 years, and he's getting ready to retire. And so he'd like to hand off the treasurer position to someone. So I just wrote down some of the things that he does. He manages our bank account. He manages the PayPal account, which is what we have connected to our website. He collects all the donations through PayPal. He sends out acknowledgments and receipts. He files our taxes. He became very familiar with all the 501c3 rules for taxes and financial rules. As part of being a treasurer, you will serve on the 11Q Research and Resource Group Board, which means you'll help make financial decisions for the group. We keep the board updated on financial standings, give financial advice to the group, participate in yearly board meetings, and vote on board issues. So the treasurer is a full board member and votes on all the issues that we vote on. And we also have an opening. We actually haven't had this, and I would just like someone to do this because I do it all right now. I'd like help. But a secretary, to help keep up with our email lists and our, mailing lists and sending out information to the group, taking minutes at our board meetings and planning meetings, helping to coordinate fundraisers, doing some of the, intermediary work there. A secretary would serve on the board also as a full board member, then participate in yearly meetings, vote on board issues, and keep the board updated with current contact lists. And so these are kind of the two positions that we're looking for help with. And so if anyone is interested in either of these, just come talk to me and I'll be really excited if you say you're interested in helping out in either of these ways. And then, does anyone have any questions, I guess, before we move on? Anyone have any questions about putting on the conference, about the use of finances, any of that?
Some of you probably noticed that there's no line item for Lindsay or Jessica or anybody else on the board taking any money at all. So all of their time is donated. All of Paul's time is donated. So serving on the board is a big deal. Okay. So
that I didn't.
As the husband of the one who's running it, please help her.
All right, so if there's no questions related to any of this, our final thing is we wanted to just give Dr. Grosfeld a special thank you for all he's done to help prepare this conference. So he has been with us from the get-go on planning this, and we've had meetings. Oh, it started out like once a month, and then we were like getting to a little bit closer where we're having him every couple weeks to get things planned. And we all would have a giant line item of things to do, and I feel like his was always kind of long. He always had a lot of stuff to do related to the conference. But beyond that, we just want to thank him for all the support that he gives to our organization. You know, if any of us have issues, you can text him or call him at any time and he responds right away. You can have your doctors contact him and he responds right away. He truly is here to help us and our children, and he doesn't get paid for any of that. There's no pay for being our support. There's no pay for being our chief medical advisor. And I guarantee that his pay for doing research for this is not, he's not getting that. So we just wanted to give a special thank you to Paul. Let's give him a round of applause. There's something in the email for you.
I saw that and I looked to read it because I thought it was some.
Oh, no, don't do that. There's something in the email for you.
Thank you, guys.
Yes.
I just want to say it's a total two-way street of giving and taking, receiving, and like I said, it just has enriched my life and the lives of my family so much. So I hope we can do this for a really long time. I actually found out when Salome, Congressman Levin's representative, spoke the other day, there's something called something like the Congressional Caucus on Rare Diseases. I think they actually will take people that are not politicians like me to be part of that. So I'm gonna look into that because I would love to be a voice for you guys at the national policy setting level. So fingers crossed. Thank you.
I just want to say, I've been in my meetings by Dr. Paul at 10:30 on Monday morning. I told him my bags were lost and that they needed CPAP. He went straight to his wife, wanted his wife to source me 2 adapters. That's way above and beyond the function or the job of a doctor. So I said, really, really special thanks, and I give them that now.
I will say, whenever I have to get off, it's right to my wife.
So a special hand for Susan too.
Yeah. And all the other spouses that are maybe a little bit more in the background who are so important in all this.
I also sent you something. It's some canned meat, but don't open it. It's spam.
You just give it else, so.
He's got a joke for every situation. All right, are there any other questions or thoughts related to the 11Q business meeting? Okay, then we will adjourn the 11Q business meeting, and like I said previously, because of my snafu with the bleeding disorder presentation, we're gonna have a discussion, and so we will give you all the link to listen to it, but we thought just listening might be a little bit distracting in here and hard to do. It is the best presentation. This is Dr. Lambert gave it 2 years ago, and she was, my kids were 23 and 20 at the time, and I had never understood the bleeding disorder like I did after her presentation. It suddenly like clicked like, oh, now I get it. So it is a fantastic presentation. But like I said, when we were there, we saw the slides, but the slides did not advance in how we were recording at that time. And so the recording is just, you can just listen to her. You can't actually see the slides. And so I think that everyone needs to take the opportunity to go and listen to it. Obviously not watch it, but listen to it because there's so much great information. But in lieu of that, we thought that we would just instead open it up to a discussion about bleeding disorders and issues that your children may have had, and questions that you may have. Granted, I'm not going to answer the question. Paul can maybe try.
Before we do that,
Yeah.
you want to just broach the topic of the next conference, just briefly?
Oh, yes. Well, we are having a conference in 2 years, again, obviously in 2026. Since we're on the West Coast this time, we will likely try and do something either Midwest or East Coast. Jessica and I have got to do some research on different locations and such, but if anyone has any spectacular ideas, you can share them with us. I'm not promising that I'm going to do it there.
Okay, so just a little bit about Paris Trousseau and the bleeding problem. I am not a pediatric hematologist, that is my disclaimer. But I will share with you a few of the things that I see coming up pretty frequently. First of all, if your child has Jacobson syndrome, they have Paris Trousseau, period. And I know that there's a lot of confusion. Sometimes people's doctors will say, well, you don't have Paris Trousseau just because you have Jacobson syndrome. You do, period. Having said that, just to review, there are 2 components to Paris Trousseau. One is there tend to be low numbers of platelets and sometimes low numbers of white cells, which gets related to the immunodeficiency issues. That's number 1. The tendency is over time that those numbers will get better and tend to normalize. So typically what happens is a baby is born, diagnosed either prenatally or just shortly after birth. They have a platelet count of 20,000. People go rushing to do bone marrow biopsies maybe. It's not necessary. I've actually advised people to go against their doctor's recommendations. Having said that, at some point early on, the doctors may decide to do a platelet transfusion. That's okay. If it's critically low and the child is determined to be at pretty significant risk for bleeding. But in general, we try to avoid frequent platelet transfusions just because you're treating a number. Because what can happen is over time, your body will actually make antibodies to those foreign transfused platelets. And that actually can make things worse instead of better, because as soon as you transfuse, your body's platelets that you make, antibodies that you make will attack those platelets. So we just try to transfuse thoughtfully. And there are definitely times to transfuse. I'll talk about that in a sec. So the other main component of Paris Trousseau, which some people may not appreciate, is that there can be or is decreased function of those platelets. So the critical caveat here is do not just go by that number, so that if you get a CBC and your kid's platelet count is 150,000, that doesn't mean they're not at risk. They are still at risk for bleeding problems. So having said that, like everything else with Jacobson syndrome, there are different degrees of severity. So I have heard cases where they were diagnosed, a child was diagnosed late, they had already had surgery and seemingly did fine. That's great. So that's one end of the spectrum, but that doesn't mean they're still not potentially at risk. The other end of the spectrum is they bruise easily, they're at risk for bleeding all the time. So having said that, we do have a protocol, which we're hoping Dr. Lambert can help us to update. Bottom line is, even before your child might need anything that can put them at risk for bleeding, give that protocol to your treating physicians. They are legally obligated, at least in this country, to follow that. At the very least, if you just tell your treating doctors, whether it's an ear, nose, and throat doctor, or a heart surgeon, or cardiologist, or whoever, your child has Paris-Trousseau syndrome, and make sure that you get connected to a pediatric hematologist. And I can guarantee you, any pediatric hematologist at any major children's hospital should know or will know what Paris-Trousseau is. And basically, I'm not a hematologist, so I always defer to the hematologist the specifics of what to do in specific situations. But as long as you know that your child has Paris-Trousseau and you give that information to the treating physicians, you have done your due diligence, and really nothing bad should ever happen.
I know we've talked about the life-saving protocols.
Uh-huh.
Does everybody know where they are?
So the question is, does everybody know where these life-saving protocols are? They're on the website, and I think they're translated in multiple languages.
So at the very top, you'll see home, 2024 conference, and then life-saving protocols. So in there, there's the bleeding protocol, there's immunology protocol. Those are the two that are there for now, but those are where they are. You can print them off, PDF, take them to your physician, keep it in your medical binder just in case you need it, but that's where they are.
I keep it in my car because we had a car accident.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I mean, I have it all over the place, everywhere.
Another little caveat, there is not a specific test for platelet function for Paris-Trousseau, and that gets a little confusing. Some function tests might come up normal, but that doesn't mean their platelets are normal. It just means we're not smart enough to come up with the right test. Hang on to that thought. And sometimes people will, because of what a specific kind of test is done, they will say, no, your child doesn't have Paris-Trousseau, your child has von Willebrand's disease. Has anyone here been told that? Okay, we'll just forget it. But anyway, your child has Paris-Trousseau, period. That's not von Willebrand's disease. The same test that some people use to test for Paris-Trousseau will test for von Willebrand's. It's not von Willebrand's. Okay, you got a question back? Two questions. Go ahead.
Explain why it's 100% and it doesn't matter. Turns on or off, all of that.
So the question is, some of your treating physicians question whether or not your child has Paris-Trousseau. Is that
Some parents.
some parents? Parents of children with Jacobson syndrome?
Yeah.
Well,
The immunologist, parents, like, I can't give out the protocol because, like, I don't understand enough about the science, but because she had open heart surgery and she has a wonky, just like the immunology, like she has a wonky hematology profile, the platelets don't function super well. But there's some, I don't understand enough to even explain why there's a non-release, but can you explain why every child, no matter what?
so pretty much by definition, we know at least the main gene that causes Paris-Trousseau is actually one of the genes I talked about for the heart defects called FLY1. So by definition, your child has FLY1 deleted.
Even if, doesn't matter the size of the lesion, where
Doesn't matter if FLY1 is deleted, and there may be a very, very rare exception where it's, let's say, interstitial deletion that doesn't cover that. But at least for the classic Jacobson syndrome, a deletion that goes somewhere to the end of the chromosome, FLY1 is deleted, your child has Paris-Trousseau. The severity of it, granted, is variable. And again, some people don't even know until they got the diagnosis because they didn't have any major bleeding problems. But I also know, I can remember there was a kid from Florida who had nosebleeds that were so bad he ended up in the ICU needing blood transfusion. So there's a whole range, but my philosophy is err on the side of caution. And if it turns out they don't have bleeding problems, that's great. But you don't want to be caught off guard. There have also been devastating tragedies that actually led to a malpractice lawsuit a number of years ago where I was an expert witness because a child came to the emergency room a few days after having orthopedic surgery, so stress from that, ended up having an ulcer that was bleeding, came to the ER. The mom who herself, I think, was an ICU nurse, tried to tell the treating physician, my kid is prone to bleeding. They blew her off and the child died. This is like 20 years ago, but point being, that should never happen. And I would bluntly say that if your treating physicians are resisting or whoever is resisting, move on. So you didn't need to ask me.
She had a concussion, and we did not know whether to go to the MRI, to go to the hospital, have an MRI, the children's emergency room in Boston, and hematology didn't weigh in because they hadn't seen her in 6 years. And so they didn't know whether to do the full MRI or the mini one that can detect a normal brain disease or whatever. They ended up doing the truncated version, and I was in that. But it was one of those ones where, she's never had an issue. Can it change over time? Is it like any time there's some kind of trauma, no matter what, that's just what we go to the.
Well, I think you have to, again, err on the side of caution. So in this case, if your kid gets a concussion, if it's severe enough that they actually are diagnosed clinically with a concussion, to me, that means there's been significant head trauma to the brain. And by the way, Virgil, feel free to chime in, but, if it's been a significant enough blunt trauma to the head, then I think certainly they are at risk for an intracranial bleed. And in that case, I would probably err on the side of admitting for observation and frequent neurological checks to make sure with a low threshold to do brain imaging of some sort. That would be my approach. Yes.
You were answering my question, kind of had this asked with regards to testing. So when we obviously can get platelet counts regularly, but the performance of the platelets, we found very unsatisfactory sort of information. Because sort of, does she stop bleeding at count 5, or does she stop bleeding sometime after? And that's all we've ever known, sometime after that one count. Is there anything in terms of testing, anything else we should be looking at to help?
Yeah, so the question is, just coming back to the point before, there is not a specific Paris-Trousseau function, platelet function test. So I'm hoping Dr. Lambert maybe will be able to provide us with an update that maybe there is something better that I'm not aware of, but for now, it's more academic. You just assume they have dysfunctional platelets, period. And, if you do the right kind of test and it's abnormal, great, but just act on the assumption that they have
So
dysfunctional platelets.
this was the post that was on Facebook and what the answer that Dr. Lambert gave 2 years ago.
Hopefully he doesn't contradict.
Well, she just said, this was the post, says Dr. Let's see, I have to find the right place. I asked her about my daughter's situation, how as a non-medical professional should follow up with a specialist when they say otherwise. Her response was wonderful, telling me to ask them how useful is a platelet aggregation at detecting granular deformities. So that's kind of what we're looking for, is granular deformities. And Dr. Lambert told us last time, if you have any issues, they can contact her and she can explain it to them, that what we're looking for is granular deformities.
Right, and granular deformities, I'm pretty sure means actually doing electron microscopy to do very, very high resolution analysis of the actual internal structure of the platelets or the megakaryocytes. So. Yes.
My daughter's 15, no indication of disorder, they upset issues.
I don't know for sure. What I would say is the risk of bleeding can vary. For example, if you get a viral infection, a virus can suppress bone marrow function, meaning you might have a transient decrease in platelets, which at that time you may present with bruising or bleeding. So I think in general, I think once you have it, you're always gonna have it. It's not necessarily gonna get progressively better or worse in terms of function. And again, Dr. Lambert may be able to correct me otherwise, but there can be fluctuations, and it's not uncommon to hear this story when a kid has, you know, a cold or influenza or something, all of a sudden they've got little petechiae all over, or easy bruising. So that's likely because there can be transient decreases in that platelet management. Yes.
I was just gonna add, I remember Dr. Lambert said it impacts mucosal membrane a little bit more than other areas of the body. So that is why maybe like with some removal time, there can be more complications with using wisdom teeth specifically. So like depending on your child's trauma and perhaps performance of, you know, how their body's functioning, you may see different outcomes for different types of teeth. Just a thought.
Yeah, so for example, wisdom teeth, you know, there's more blood flow that goes to your head than any other part of your body, right? And so that's gonna be where you're potentially most prone for bleeding. So I think maybe some people can comment on this, but for wisdom teeth, we've actually in some cases just gone ahead and recommended transfusion of platelets right at the time of the procedure, just to be safe. Yes.
Okay, that was an excellent question. Jayla, my daughter, has an appointment July 1st. But they canceled it because she has to go see a hematologist before she has, her adult teeth is growing over top of her baby. And they told us that we have to go see a hematologist. Then they said they don't feel comfortable with us seeing our personal hematologist with, CHOP, we follow CHOP.
Children's Hospital of Philadelphia,
Yeah.
here, and that's where Dr. Lambert is from, right? Shot? Yeah.
Yes, they want us to go see the one at St. Christopher now, because they want to make sure that somebody is there on call. But I was so confused because I didn't, first it was she was bleeding too much, then they just randomly canceled it and we didn't understand why. So should we do something about the platelets before we take her?
Right, so what kind, so some kind of oral surgery coming up or
Yes,
something,
yes.
right? So, again, she has cleft Paris trousseau,
Right.
just assume that. Generally what you need to do is have the hematologist and the surgeon, or periodontal, or, you know, whatever, oral maxillofacial surgeon, work together so they can coordinate the plan. And it sounds like a totally elective procedure, so see the hematologist first. I'm not quite sure why you kind of alluded to that there's not someone on call at CHOP to help with that, or? You mean St. Christopher's?
Yeah.
Is that where she's supposed to have the surgery then? Oh, okay, well, St. Christopher's is a major children's hospital as well, also in Philadelphia, but they're a good hospital, so they should have a pediatric hematologist there. So just be proactive and yeah, just see their hematologist first and then coordinate, make sure that person coordinates with the oral surgeon. Go ahead, Jack, go ahead.
So Heidi did,
Go ahead.
so Heidi did have her wisdom teeth done, and again, we're blessed to be in the backyard. So she had a platelet transfusion at UCSC. And then went to, ratings to have her wisdom teeth pulled out. She did have an issue with a bad tooth later, now as an adult. And all these, to find an oral surgeon that'll work in a hospital is, on an adult patient, is almost impossible. It took me probably about 3 months to find somebody that would pull the tooth. So get as much as your dental work done while you can be seen by a pediatric.
It's true, and it's actually, I've had this with really complex congenital heart disease patients that need general anesthesia for wisdoms. And there's no resource for that once they're in the adult age group. It just drives me crazy. We are so cautious with our pediatric, you know, complex congenital heart disease patients when they need anesthesia for anything. We insist that that's done in an inpatient hospital setting, and it actually terrifies me, not to create fears, but it is deeply concerning to me that it's just kind of blown off once you become adult age.
So then my second point is, as our girls mature, make sure you have a good gynecologist
Absolutely.
that will, Heidi just has an implant, so she never has a cycle. And, she coordinates, again, I'm blessed to have a UCSD gynecologist that can coordinate with Dr. Paul a lot. But that is a huge thing, because prior to that, it wasn't fun.
What age did you start?
I don't know, she probably got her implant probably 18-ish, so she did a few years of just what nature was doing, and then we missed it in the butt.
Yeah, let's come back. Did you have a question still or no?
Um,
Hang on to those.
In terms of, we have changed several times the medications we have on hand is consistency in the delivery method, like Stimate was our original one, and nose spray. Then apparently that went away, or I didn't quite understand what happened to it. But the PPAP, now we have a injection at home that we would never have used, thankfully, but we have it on hand. I just would be interested to hear kind of what people have for their emergency stash, if they have one, and so what that looks like.
Right, and I think this would again be a great topic for Dr. Lambert to weigh in on, but you know, there's inhaled vasopressin BDAVP, which can be used you know, for an acute situation. There is something called, I think it's like tranexamic acid.
Yeah.
There, that can be applied topically or systemically through an IV. Again, these are questions. for
And
Dr.
it's a
Lambert.
tablet, that's what we have, we have it as a tablet.
So, okay, so you can take it as a tablet, but
For transgenic acid, yeah.
so
We have
these
that.
are nuances that I'm not gonna be able to help you, but those are things out there that I think Dr. Lambert, you know. Yes,
Just want to say, Jamie has, data function tests done in Ireland. I don't know what the test was, but they told us that his reading and talking time is 3 times the normal. So whatever that means, I don't know, but I mean, that's what we have written down, that is 3 times the normal. And then he gets the DDAVP infusion when he's having any surgeries, and we carry the tranexamic acid in tablet form all the time.
sounds very reasonable to me. So when you say 3 times normal, basically what that means is whatever period of time platelets that function normally take to do their thing, in Jamie's case, it takes 3 times as long.
Yeah, so if he gets a nosebleed, we think it's stopped. And then an hour later, it just starts up again.
Yeah.
Can keep doing that for like a couple of days rather than just finish. It just keeps, every time you think that the problem has happened, it hasn't actually happened. And it goes down.
Yeah. Question back
And,
there.
I'm just adding, especially for the new parents, so we actually see Dr. Lambert, she's actually our
Aww.
she's actually our hematologist. We had to get ear tubes put in at the Children's Hospital Philadelphia, so same affiliation with her. And then 6 hours before the surgery, it got canceled because nobody read like the hematology, like nobody coordinated all the hematology. No one even was aware. So I think for anybody who's doing anything, it's worthwhile calling a few days in advance to make sure like, hey, you guys are all prepared, you have everything set up. Because even within that same system with her there, nobody picked up the phone and called her, and it took us a week to get them back to talk to each other and reschedule it. So just to avoid that headache for everybody.
Yeah, and you know, the real message, which is not newsworthy to anybody in this room, you have to advocate for your child and not expect anyone else to be as proactive as you will be. You're, go ahead. Well, I actually feel like a hematologist up here. That's insane.
Talk about anybody explain to them about menstruation, fresh results, that one thing we need, like preemptively do anything?
Well, I mean, I can just, and I'm an expert on it, but you know, in general, it's not uncommon for females with Jacobson syndrome and parachute, so to have heavy menses, and it can be quite heavy, I'm sure. And that is right nodding your head. So I think you kind of need to take a little bit of a wait and see approach, but be ready or maybe even proactively, get your child plugged into even there are adolescent gynecologists to address that. I think generally it's very manageable with either the implant or oral contraceptive.
We can talk just process in the last 6 months. So the other thing our college did after the first cycle was to do an LTC and look at, I believe we're looking at the phenotype level, and I'd be interested if anybody else has been through this to see sort of as a way of gauging the volume, right?
Just looking at her blood count, yeah, if she's anemic,
Right.
that's suggestive that, yeah.
And we're tracking, you know, March to date. Yeah.
So scared.
I was.
And I everything I am so scared, because my daughter's attitude is changing,
Yeah.
and I see the change, and I was like, you gonna go stay with your grandma, I can't. do it." I mean, and then she took it into the tantrums, and I was like, oh, it's coming.
It's coming.
You gotta go. She's 10, so if I was 10, I was, I'm sorry to all the men in the room. I'm sorry. But her stepfather now, or he'll be like, you wanna check? No, I don't. Call my mama. And that's.
Strength and knowledge, and I dare say, we men are not so easily offended, right? Other questions? Anybody? All right, well, if I could just, again, thank all of you guys for being part of this. What I love about these conferences is you guys are from all over the country, all over the world, so much wonderful diversity and, with these crazy political times, and I'm not gonna get political, but what I love is that this cause brings people together, and what I love to see is how it just absolutely brings out the best in people. And I think we should be a model for how, as a society, we should operate. Differences, yeah, but when we're brought together by the things that are most important, we actually see that we do have more important things in common than what, than the differences. And so, thank you guys.
Okay, our last thing is our picnic today. So everyone wear your t-shirts. We're gonna take a picture at the beginning of the picnic, a big group picture. Remember to take your posters out of this room. If you just wanna take the pictures off.